And we talked a little bit about Pentecostalism, and slightly on the uniqueness of a Spirit-led life. And when you think about, we talked a bit in the broad sense of general Christian discipleship, but what about Pentecostals in particular? What do they bring that's unique to discipleship that maybe other denominations just aren't there? Or I'm not saying that we're better or less in that sense, but is there something unique about Pentecostalism that we bring to discipleship?
Well, I think if we're genuinely Pentecostal, then we should be alert to the life of the Spirit, the work of the Spirit. So like I said earlier, this doesn't happen without the Spirit's work in people's lives anyway. So we should be very alert to that to begin with. We should just be aware of that. So it's not just this A plus B is going to equal C. It's like, no, it's an actual work of the Spirit to produce change. If that's the case, then I think you go back to the life of Jesus and you see that the work of the Spirit was 24/7. And when you see the teaching of the New Testament, the person of the Spirit is, we keep in step with Him. We're alongside of Him. He instructs us about what to say. He's the one who convicts of sin and righteousness, judgment to come. But He also, on a Thursday, will give us words of wisdom or knowledge as we're relating to a friend, as we're engaged with somebody who's new in faith but really hitting roadblocks. He's the one who will allow us to actually see giftings of the miraculous and so on. So instead of bifurcating almost, again, the danger when we've made disciple making a program and it's a classroom and it's content, but over here is life,
Yeah.
and then again, we've even bifurcated off life in the Spirit or the work of the Spirit to be primarily you're in a service and it's going to happen now, or it's always, and believe me, I believe in the altar and the work of the Spirit there, but if that's it, then you haven't linked Spirit empowerment with making of disciples 24/7. When you see the way Jesus went about it, and when you see the way I think the New Testament instructs us, you're talking a lifestyle of Spirit empowerment that shows up in making disciples. Yeah. You have these miraculous divine encounters, these divine appointments. I know, for instance, in my own efforts of trying to be obedient to the Lord, and I'm involved in sports chaplaincy, and so you're at the Pan Ams, and you realize you're keeping in step with the Spirit, and I'm looking for that one divine encounter that day and praying about that, and suddenly your antenna's up, suddenly you're more aware, this is that moment, this is this person. The Lord gives words to share. You see something happening in that person's life that's way beyond the ordinary. It's amazing when you do really understand that the Spirit is alongside of us to make disciples, whether it's people who still don't know Jesus and having those divine appointments all the way through to, mature people engaged together experiencing the life of the Spirit.
And I think, too, like when I look at the history of Pentecostalism in general, the early movements, the people tended to act and respond more in that way. And even if you think of some of the proto-Pentecostal leaders of the day in the late holiness movement and things like that, they were very much going down the street. What is the Spirit saying to me? Am I aware of the Spirit? Am I aware of those divine encounters? Alongside of that, do you think that there were discipleship methods that we had in our early movements as Pentecostals that we sort of lost along the way that were really good and we kind of need to get back to?
Yeah, if you go back to the word intentional, and then you realize that I think, I try to be a good student of Pentecostal history, there was a certain simplicity about following Jesus, hungering after Him, and then sharing that good news and the power of the Spirit. And it was in somewhat that simplicity that led to an intentionality that, these were main things. This is who we are. This is what we do. When you multiply out and get all of these great things we do and our churches do, and you really multiply out expectations and so on, you can actually end up with congregations where the vast majority do not even know what it looks like to be intentional about just day by day sharing their faith in the power of the Spirit. I believe, anyways, we have a tendency to glorify first generations, and they had their issues too. But in fairness, I do believe that first generation might not even recognize to some degree how we operate today, because again, there was this more simplistic, in the positive sense of that word, focused, intentional. This is who we are. This is what we do. And frankly, even in my own leadership, I'm trying to work with others to help us recapture, in the midst of all of our diversity and all the things we offer and so on, let's make sure the main things are the main things. And that's to be empowered by the Spirit to go and make disciples and be in relationship with people so that we can do that. So I think I am trying to draw off of what I understand to be what's right and good in those that have gone before us, and have that kind of sharp focus.
Yeah. And what one sort of last point that I want to discuss is, especially with you dealing with the 2020 initiative and the idea of vitality, we're dealing with the idea of health in Formation. How do we, as pastors, as Christians, lay people, how do we pursue a healthier lifestyle in our spirituality, in our emotional health? I mean, that's all related to discipleship, so we might as well just say a healthier discipleship in our lives. How do we get there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if I understand, if I've been able to maintain some sense of wholeness in my life and my relationships through 40 plus years of ministry, half of which was primarily dedicated to youth and young adults, so that could make you go insane right there, But,
I hear it,
but I would say that the critical thing is a little bit what I just described. There's always been something that the Lord's helped me with to keep the main thing the main things. And in so doing, you end up with this delight in doing the will of God. You actually, like Jesus talked about in the middle of a very busy day and heavy demand day, don't worry about me. My meat is to do the will of the Father. So this may sound fairly philosophical, but I think it's actually very practical. When those especially involved in leadership and in the life of the church and ministry are keeping, the main things, what they know they're called to do as the main thing, there is a fulfillment in that. There's a meat in that that satisfies you, that actually helps you to maintain even your emotional stability and so on. There's something about knowing I'm called to do this, I'm keeping my focus on these main things, and it's bearing fruit. There's something about that does more for you than a sabbatical. Now, I'm going to be taking a sabbatical soon, so I try to deal with things in wholeness. But the bottom line is, if you don't get that right, nothing else will help. So clarity about our calling, including we make disciples, but just personally, even clarity for me within that, and then to make sure that's the main things I'm about. I'm not naive to local church life and all the other demands that come and so on. But even Jesus kept bringing it back to, but here are the main things I do. I'm in communion with the Father. I seek to save those that are lost. I make disciples of this core of people around me. I have time for them. I'm their rabbi. I teach them. I lead by example. And, I exercise a life of simplicity to keep some of the other things out that would distract me from being about my Father's business. And, you can't do any better than going back to Jesus and just seeing how he kept bringing it back down to, here's the will, here's what I'm about, here's how I make disciples.
It's true. I think back and look at Jesus' life, and I think about my own ministry. I mean, Jesus, he, like you said, he was always about the Father's will. I'm here. I know what my mission is. I know what I need to do. I know what my calling is. And I think back in my own life, in my own ministry, whenever I've hit tough times, and how many times you go through those motions in your brain about, well, am I better to leave? Am I better to go out and and try another profession or something like that. But it's always the calling. It's always, no, you know what? The Lord has called me to this place, and I need to figure out how to become whole and content in this place and fulfill my calling in the process. And like you said, it's looking at, what did Jesus do to do that? He was alone sometimes. He went alone with the Father. He did these practical little things.
Yeah, I think, again, pivotal for me, David, was that study out of the Gospels for 3 years when I was younger in ministry and getting my bearings. That if I've had a lot of other great mentors in my life, but bottom line is if I could really take those core principles of who Jesus is and what is in his ministry on earth and make those the main things, it's actually led to, some might question this, but a fair level of sanity.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you don't have emotional duress. It doesn't mean there aren't tough times. Jesus had those. There's times you see the huge emotional duress even in Jesus' life, better yet our own, but but he did the will of the Father. He accomplished exactly what he was supposed to accomplish it, and his delight was doing the will of the Father. And boy, if we could say that for every one of us, that in the end, I have some challenges and I got some duress, but in the end, I've kept the main things, and there's been a fruitfulness in that and a fulfillment in that. That's a great way to come eventually to the end of the line and know that we've done what he's called us to do.
Right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, David. It's great to have you on. Your insights and your experience have just been so beneficial into flushing out some of the issues of discipleship, and I hope you come back sometime in the near future.
Oh, hey. My friends on the Rock keep bringing me back. I quite like that. They even got me to Labrador one time.
Oh, so, right on. Very good.
Yeah,
I haven't been there, so you're one ahead of me.
Yeah,
there.
well, I complained one time when I came here that I hadn't been to Labrador, and the folks at Lab City made sure I got over.
Oh, very good.
So that's what you got to do. Someone bring David to Labrador.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, there you go.
All right. There's a signpost. All right. Very good. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.